Back when I was in my last year of junior high, when we were meeting the new 6th graders, one of them asked a question out loud to the entire class. Who here likes the Legend of Zelda? I was the only student to raise their hand, so naturally we became good friends. And it is that same friend I made play Skyward Sword many years later, while he had 2 broken arms. Why I thought it'd be a good idea to give this game that requires rigorous motion control to an unfortunate soul who can barely keep the remote pointed at the screen will forever be a mystery. And while not having been able to play the shiny new Zelda game at the time likely gave him a broken heart to pair with his broken arms, Skyward Sword has a special place in mine, as it holds a special place in the franchise, taking place at the very beginning chronologically. This game works to set up the rest of the Zelda series in lots of key ways, and one of them is very much its darker aspects. 3D Zeldas especially never fail to embrace the macabre. Even Wind Waker, which has a cel-shaded cartoon Link sailing across the very waters that flooded old Hyrule. The Great Sea was formed by a torrential downpour, instigated by the goddesses, so that they could bury the kingdom beneath waves, and trap Ganon in what should have been his watery tomb. Now that I think about it, the water dragon of this game, Farron, similarly floods the forest to drown out the invading monsters. It didn't really work out in either case. I know anybody who's ever reviewed this game has made the comparison, but in terms of art style, Skyward Sword found a middle ground between the animated pop aesthetic of Wind Waker and the overtly angsty Twilight Princess, for a look inspired by French Impressionist paintings. But how does this first legend in the Legend of Zelda compare to the rest? Is this jovial visual step back from when Twilight fell an indicator of what to expect in terms of darker content? Make sure to call for your loft wing because we're skydiving right in. Throughout the game's prologue, there are lots of nightmarish sequences involving this minatory beast called the Imprisoned. It seemingly came from or caused a fissure, not unlike the cracked earth the earliest known malevolent forces in the Zelda universe apparently crawled out of, as explained by the game's intro. Which, by the way, goes on to talk about how these demons mounted a brutal assault upon the surface people, and murdered without hesitation. We are less than a minute into this game, folks. For a company that likes to generally embrace euphemisms in its games, this language is a little surprising, and effective at giving the villains like Girahim more of an edge, with his threats, as we'll see later on. For now though, let's get back to this big bundle of joy. Once it emerges, the Imprisoned howls and writhes around, exuding a perceptible black aura that is legitimately fearful. Hey, I'd suffer a rude awakening from my sleep too if I dreamt about a creature with 3 sets of fanged teeth. During Link's night terror, the thing just stands there, menacingly, but later on when he's knocked unconscious by the tornado Girahim summons to pluck Zelda out of the sky, he hallucinates about her being eaten by this voracious demon. For me, this is probably the last instance of the Imprisoned working to invoke a sense of dread. Besides, the dread of monotonous gameplay you'll feel in having to fight it at least 3 times. Because the moment the monster shows its toes is the moment the once menacing and intimidating design falls flat. The need to slash at and burst its appendages is a little disconcerting, but the thing's exaggerated bulbous tootsies don't exactly scream fear me. Its daunting appearance is further detracted from when it starts sliding on its belly, uphill. Then again with the subsequent fights when it grows these ridiculous arms and fingers. These choices make sense on paper. The entire purpose of these encounters is to prevent its ascent to the sealed temple, so the addition of arms increases the ordeal's difficulty, and the player's apprehension, since the primal threat's given a new way to reach its destination faster. But I just think that it was all a bit of a letdown in execution. This is a form, albeit a lesser form, of what is essentially the origin of all evil in the entire Zelda canon. It's an eternal force that Hylia had to seal away because of its raw destructive power, a fact that isn't visually reflected here as well as it could have been. I will say though that the non-standard game over resulting from this predator reaching the sealed temple is frightening, especially when you learn what exactly its target is. Another fight that is heavily hyped up but somewhat fails to deliver is Tantalus, the boss of the Sandship, which is one of the coolest dungeons in Zelda's history by the way. Normally, you'd expect to face a boss the moment Link passes through a boss door, but in a welcome twist of Zelda conventions, just the enemy's tentacles appear to greet Link before retracting in a sly attempt to sink the ship. So immediately upon entering, you're tasked with turning Link the heck around and fleeing to the upper deck. As more tentacles try to hinder your progress, Skyward strikes must be utilized to slice them in half as the dismembered limbs flail around and wither away. After the panic-induced race to safety, and with a descriptor like Abyssal Leviathan, you'd expect to be pitted against a classic sea serpent, or an incomprehensibly terrifying Lovecraftian elder god, but instead we're greeted with this goony lad, looking like he leapt straight out of Disney's Monsters, Inc. Randy Boggs has a scarier appearance than Tentalus, from the prequel, Monsters University. I'm just kidding. Something very unsettling does happen during the second phase of this fight, actually. As I just alluded to, the regenerating tentacles that make up Tantalus's hair eventually reveal mouths that relentlessly home in on Link, until he's presumably chomped to bits after fainting. That's enough about how Skyward Sword disappoints, though. I've probably sounded mostly pessimistic thus far, but I really do like this game, enough to have fully played through it twice. So I'll start speaking about all the times this game excels with genuinely blood-curdling themes. This is best exemplified with one dungeon, the Ancient Cistern, that does have a fitting boss encounter to pair with its unique aesthetic, plus a surprising inspiration stemming from a Japanese Buddhist short story, specifically The Spider's Thread, written by the father of the Japanese short story, Ryonosuke Akutagawa. The original tale centers around Lord Buddha, and his ability to peer directly into hell and observe its sinners through the crystal clear waters of a lotus-filled pond in paradise. As he watches over these damned souls, one in particular, a murderer named Kandata, catches Buddha's attention. While the criminal was otherwise heartless in life, he did perform one selfless deed by choosing to spare a spider he was about to crush underneath his foot. Because of this single act of compassion, Buddha decided to try and rescue the man from hell by lowering a single silk thread of a spider down from paradise into the distant depths where the sinners squirm and choke in Cho no Ike, the lake of blood. When Kandata looks up and notices the silvery thread shimmering in the darkness, he grabs hold and begins the long climb up with ferocity. However, when Kandata stops to take a break, looking down just momentarily to see how far he's come, he sees a swarm of sinners that had the same idea of leaving this literal hellhole. In fear that the thread was snap in two from everyone's weight, Kandata shouts at them all, claiming the thread's his and his alone, a selfish act, which causes what he was trying to prevent as the blessed thread breaks and sends them all plummeting back down into the abyss. Link, who is playing Kandata in this situation, is not an egocentric character though, so he is able to make it to the top relatively unscathed. Obviously, the entire underground we have to navigate here is inspired by hell, as depicted by the spider's thread, complete with pools of blood and sinners a la cursed bokoblins. They are festering foes that are reportedly able to reanimate after death through sheer malice, and will uniquely cower at the sight of Link's sacred shield. In classic Zelda fashion too, there's an arena made up of skeletal remains, a massive bone pile that crunches with every step Link takes. It's gross, but kind of satisfying, is that weird? When Link does ascend from this place, the path to enlightenment is bestowed, or what would be enlightenment if Girahim hadn't corrupted what waits there. This is Koloktos, an automaton abomination armed with 6 swords, held together by red cores in its arms Link can latch onto with his whip and dismantle. The chest core acts as a heart, armored with plating, that can be easily shredded through by stealing and using the mech's own weapon against it. When Koloktos sustains enough damage, its head rotates around while letting out a childlike giggle as the curse leaves its body and function ceases. Speaking of off-putting laughs, we'll get to you, Girahim. I want to now talk about my personal favorite sections of the game, these Silent Realm trials, designed by the goddesses to test Link's unbreakable spirit. And what did they think would be the best way to accomplish this? By scaring him and the player out of their wits, as we're tasked with filling the physical representation of Link's spirit with sacred tears while avoiding these sleeping guardians. Not to be confused with the infamous guardians from Breath of the Wild, though they are perhaps equally as terrifying when provoked. So long as the timer, in the form of that slowly wilting flower atop the spirit vessel, has at least one petal intact, the guardians remain motionless and can do no harm. However, if a tear isn't collected every 90 seconds, that flower will die, causing the guardians to spring to life after a slow fade into red as the sound of a distorted ticking clock counts down, with no other task than to hunt Link down and shatter his spirit in one hit. The typically tranquil yet eerie music remains intensely heart-pounding as they chase you until another tear is collected, thankfully resetting both the guardians and the timer. In flight or flight mode, you heard that right, there is no other option. Earth Guardians will mercilessly charge Link on land, while the Sky Guardians target and incessantly float towards him from anywhere on the map. And I do mean anywhere. This type of Guardian has the ability to pass through all obstacles, which means there's nowhere the player can hide. Their non-stop pursuit and lethal intent, despite not being a force of true malevolence, along with their uncanny, expressionless faces, bring about an anxiety I haven't felt in a Zelda game since the various time limits of Majora's Mask. Adding to this stress, too, is a couple of ways you can alert them of Link's presence immediately. Accidentally stepping foot in waking water, or failing to evade the observant eyes of these ethereal watchers, are surefire ways to keep you up at night. That's sadly all I had for today, but there's much more to see here. So on the next Dark Aspects episode on the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, I'm going to reveal all, with commentary on the stranger secrets of Skyloft, before wrapping up this discussion by exploring the franchise's earliest known villains. I'll see you then.